The February 23rd, 2026
Yeah,
MSD of Lee Township Board of Education working session is called to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mrs. O'Day Marcotte, roll call, please.
Absolutely. Brandon Bowman,
Present.
Susan Graves,
Present.
Karen Burke, present, Michael Gordon,
Present.
Ramika Graham,
Present.
Ben Wakefield, I'm here, and I'm Sherry O'Day Marcotte. We are all present.
Thank you. Dr. Suggs, do we have anyone sign up for public comment this evening?
We do not tonight. Thank you.
Moving on to new business, school board policy, first reading, Mr. Fessler.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. You may have noticed that there are less board policies on here than you saw earlier, you both earlier today, or over the weekend. We had 6, 2 of them were financial related that were pretty dense and a lot of changes. And Dr. Samuel wants to just take a little more time to look those over with our legal team to understand why they're asking for some of those changes. So we just have 4 tonight for our first reading. I'm going to take them in order as they are on the agenda. And we'll start with C-750, which is medical needs of students. This is a new policy, not a revision of any kind. This is a new policy. And our recommended that we adopt this policy because of just what it says, the medical needs of students. And we are doing a lot of things that you'll find in here. But the first is right on that first page, talking about emergency stop medications for overdose intervention drugs. We started that a couple of years ago, talking naloxone, or the brand name is Narcan, in our offices, in our AED machines with our coaches and our police officers. And so that, along with EpiPens, are the emergency meds that we have a standing order from the state that we can have. So that's the first thing you'll see there that that our attorneys have recommended that we discuss. On the second page, we have those emergency stop meds. Parents can still provide those. They can provide medicine with a permission slip for students to have those. Certain medications the students can keep with them. On that third page, there's a lot added there, but really it just permits additional medications, not just naloxone. So again, for us to be able to keep some of those overdose meds, but we standing order from the state that if we get is Narcan. That's what we have in our clinics and our front offices. Wanted to point out that Indiana still grants civil immunity for administration in the manufacturer guidelines, so there are protections for our staff members who may administer. Because Narcan doesn't hurt the person not overdose. So it is person not overdosing, but they're suspected to, and someone administers Narcan, it doesn't hurt that person. There's a point under the chronic diseases on the board's not liable for civil damages. It's a result of a student's self-administration. Put that there. And under the section of student concussion, sudden cardiac arrest, all of our extracurriculars have an AED machine that's available to them and for them to take to our events, mostly for our athletic events. That's gonna be our trainers are gonna have those. But when the band goes, or the choir, they take one of those with them. Our nurses have a monthly checkup. So that's how we know that they're working. I'm on the list for the one in here, so I check the board when I'm reminded by Bessie Jacobs, our lead nurse. It's time to check those to make sure it's active and working and that our pads are up to date, as well as our batteries. And so all of our coaches are trained, and I believe it's our extracurriculars are trained to use the AED. Those are the major points I want to point out. Are there any questions?
I know it says on there that nurses are, qualified to provide medication and anyone who volunteers to take, courses. About how many, how much backup do we have at each of the schools for nurses there?
If it's talking about the administration of Narcan, a lot, because we trained all of our coaches, we trained our nurses, our front office staff, administrators. We're all trained in that. Our nurses also have a backup person that is trained through, for diabetes, to help with our diabetics through, yeah, they have a diabetes action plan. So there's a backup person that are going against nurses in there. And they have an online training that they go through. Most schools have two people, just in case, a front office person. Some schools use a paraprofessional, for backup. So we have a pretty deep bench.
I had a question about the cost of the emergency stock beds. Does the state, does it pay for the Narcan for us to check?
Yeah, Narcan's free.
Okay, how about albuterol or some of the other ones?
I don't know the cost of it.
Okay. Okay, and then the EpiPen, keep in stock, but parents are supposed to have their own for the child too. So, okay.
The nurses check the date and make sure we get those in Hendricks, our partners at Hendricks, HRH, keep us, with, and everything.
Nice.
Or we've come a long way in terms of, I remember the days when we couldn't give kids anything, like Tylenol, we couldn't give them anything. So that this has really been a shift over the past couple of years about, what we can make available in case of emergencies.
I have one more question. Are there changes in our immunization, requirements? I know we're basing it on the state, but does the State Department of Health change anything?
Not yet.
Okay.
So we're waiting, we talked with HRH and we'll hear that. What do we need to change in terms of what we want to get that out to parents as soon as we can. The state said they thought they would have the changes mid-February, so mid-February is coming on and we don't have any of those changes yet or to recommendations.
Thank you.
How often have we had to use some of these life-saving, do you know that?
I do, because we have to report that to the state, so we've administered Narcan once. And, we use the AED, 2 times, both were at athletic events, they were both on spectators. Any other questions about C-750? I'm gonna keep in the same vein as Dr. Suggs of trying to limit the policies that we need and keep them edited down, but this was one, I think it's good for us to have spelled out, the stock medicine for sure. Okay. Let's take a look at F400. F400 is our debt management policy. It's gonna have a partner policy we're gonna look at of F425. These are not required. However, we have them now, they're edited, and they're not legally required, however, they are beneficial for upcoming any kind of rating calls we have for debt assurance, and Dr. Samuel says, S&P asks every time, do we have a board policy? So, we do have that. The major, any changes in here are, great. A lot, schematics changing, policy to procedures, making sure Dr. Samuel's title is correct. I think there was one area. It's on the next one that I want to draw your attention to. The last part says, can be changed from time to time. You always have that ability as the board to has to open up the policy and have edits made. So not any major changes here, just naming the most assurance compliance and changing the titles. Any questions Dr. Samuel can answer before you want to? All right, The partner is F 425. And reserve and equity policy. I want to draw your attention to the reserve target paragraph that's at the bottom of the first page. So there's a range. The goal is to maintain that balance of our rainy day fund between 15 and 10 million. So the question is, what happens if we have to go below that? The board can offer a resolution to do that, or the board can both suspend the policy. Of course, you would understand why we needed to go below that, what was being purchased or that money being spent on, but you could do either of those things if we were to go below that 10 million. So that isn't a statute number, that's a range that was offered by our attorneys that I talked to Dr. Samuel about. Felt comfortable with that was a range we keep. I don't know, put words in your mouth, but we keep most of the time anyway. So it was a fair range to keep in our policy. Then, again, on page 3, just taking out the part that policy modifications because as the board can always revise a policy as long as it aligns with the law. There are a couple other changes again of titles. Just making sure we can change operational costs if there's an increase, or excuse me, there's an increase in the operational costs, or if the target can change or before the drop. Those are the major changes on 425. Any questions on it? And the last policy G 450. This you'll see has hardly any changes, and that's because this policy is no longer mandatory to have. However, reporting and investigation are still mandatory, so we either have to have a policy or we have to have the wording in our employee and student. So this would mirror what was in there. In our school board policies are a good place to keep something like this instead of an marking book. Because it's an area that people would go to see what we are doing as a district. So only students and employees, parents of students would see the change, but this is also community. If we took this out, the community wouldn't see those things because it'd be both for students and for employees. So we keep it in and anyone can access this policy.
Any questions?
Questions about those?
Was that, I know, I realize this, the original one was in 2016, was that originally required for gang activity? Okay.
It was required as recently as the last time we revised this. I remember being in our policy, so that's a new change.
If you remember, we had to have whole task force and we had to get a meeting here in the boardroom back in 16. And now with none of that part.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Board, I believe we're gonna have somewhat of a consolidation of items B and C. Dr. Suggs will walk us through that.
Actually, Dr. Samuel is gonna present this presentation tonight. But board, what I'd like for you to know is that this is a continuation of the discussions we've had in the recent past about enrollment. Our study that was just shared our last board meeting that shows a downward trend. So we want to make sure that you're aware of those numbers as that information is presented to us. We want to make sure you have access to that data. And so we're going to talk enrollment, and that also feeds really nicely into our February 1 count date. As you know, we have 2 counts. One at the beginning of the school year. Is it October 1 now? And then our February 1 count. So this is pretty critical data as it relates to, SCA 1, how we calculate what our budget will look like. More importantly, how we calculate out into time as SCA 1 has a pretty serious effect on how we budget the next 6 years. So, Steve?
Thank you, Dr. Suggs, and thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. That was a great introduction. As you know, there was a lot of information in Dr. Brugvig's report. We already had a lot of things on the agenda that night, so the best course of action we felt was give everyone a little bit of time to kind of digest that, circle back, knowing we'd also have this February 1 count date data available. As Dr. Suggs alluded to, SEA 1 presents some unprecedented challenges with regard to assessed valuation. As a byproduct, our funds on the operations and debt side. Dr. Brugvig's report really presents us with what are some pretty unprecedented declines in enrollment. And those obviously also have a financial impact, but those being on the educational fund. So I know we're all ready for some precedented financial news, but until then, as Dr. Suggs mentioned, our job is to make sure we're planning and that we have the right pieces in place to be able to make some projections and work through this. So that's a goal this evening. I'd like to begin with just some of those main themes from Dr. Brugvig's report. That negative replacement really as the main driver over the next 10 years is really what she was pointing to. Our annual enrollment change for 25-26 being a bit of an anomaly as far as just how many students our enrollment did decline in that given year. Of course, birth rates that, Wayne Township is not the only district dealing with declining enrollment. It's in fact pretty common across the state. My colleagues, I think the only one district that I spoke with this fall had any sort of increase. So it's definitely something that is, as the data supports, related to some lower birth rates across the state. And then, of course, the transfer enrollment based on Indiana's public school choice and students choosing MSD Wayne Township. So just a quick refresher, this was the base forecast, and that negative replacement is easy to see here. Well, easy, the numbers are small, so it's not as easy as it should be, but you can see this kindergarten group at 950. And then you can see the senior class at 1436. And again, next year, projecting right around that same size for kindergarten. Don't have to be a math whiz to see that there's more students leaving MSD Wayne Township as graduates than there are entering as kindergarten students. So that's that negative replacement. Now, some of that is related to our Achieve K-12, our Achieve 7 through 12 school. And we know that our 12th grade students are always our largest cohort in Achieve Virtual Education. So there's a little bit of play there with that, as those are obviously virtual students. Many of them would not have been with us because they don't reside within the boundaries of Wayne Township. So kindergarten, we wouldn't see them, but it gives us that perspective and kind of that reminder of negative replacement and how that works. Then the annual enrollment change with that anomaly here for 25-26, that minus 626 students is definitely more than we were tracking in our projections for this school year. We did have our enrollment trending down. We had a lot of conversations about that and how we should capture that in our financial projections. And based on the fact that we didn't see basically any increase from fall to spring last school year, we did feel it was prudent to start dialing that down at really drastic rates like this. As you can see, that 626 would be the highest, the largest change, whether that is a decrease or an increase by really at least a third, but in most years, 2/3 to more. So really unprecedented level of change in a year-to-year scenario there. And of course, the resident births that Dr. Brugvig laid out for us, This is, some of that data where bringing in a demographer is critical because they have access to and an understanding of this type of data and obviously how that drives what is happening for us within our enrollment here in MSD Wayne. And then last but not least, she did hit on this net enrollment impact from public transfers in and out. We talked about how this is really great news, reflects really strong reputation that MSD Wayne Township has across central Indiana and of course how Achieve Virtual Education across the state of Indiana plays a role in some of these numbers here being very positive for MSD Wayne Township. So that's kind of the data review. I want to pause there and just, I know you've all seen this data, but any reflections or questions before we move on and start to connect this to that February count date and then financial projections? Very good. So our February count date. You can see we went from October in 2025, 15,186 students, decrease of 199 down to 14,987. We rounded up, it's really, I think, 986.7 or something like that. But for our purposes, that is an easier number to kind of work off of here. So for context, on the right there, you see Dr. Bredvig's base forecast for 26-27. So she had that 15,184, 186 is kind of where we began. She had us dialing back about 250 students and settling in at that 14,930. So the rest of the presentation really is focused on where we find the sweet spot and how we're projecting what's going to happen. And so just as a starter to that conversation, if we take it at face value and we take that 15,987 and we subtract that 254, we would project, obviously a lower enrollment next fall than that 14,930. Will that be reality? Nobody knows. These are for real projections that we certainly will lean into, but also really just have a responsibility to continue to monitor at a pretty high level. So what happened within these numbers? Where did we see students no longer with us in February that were with us in October? 126 of them were 12th grade students. And so it's just a good reminder that, as Dr. Bredvig pointed out, sometimes you're a victim of your own success. And talking with Dr. Harvey as his team certified our enrollment, we had 125 early graduates. So they graduated a semester early. All in all, that's great news. Now, financially, for the next 6 months, it's not as positive. But as you know, our goal is to get these students to that finish line. So we certainly celebrate that. The state of Indiana does provide some financial relief for early graduates, $1,491 per student, and that won't come until next year when we get to that October count date. So there's a financial impact there, but it of course is the celebration. So of that 199 student difference, with 125 being seniors, really it's kind of onesie twosies here and there, 5 less at this elementary, 10 more at another one, to net out to that additional 74 students there. So where do we go from here? When we think about those cash flow projections, we always try to be realistic, but conservative, because we're, working to ensure that we obviously are always in good financial shape. We had built in a decline to 15,250 students in 2027, which we felt was honestly a pretty aggressive number. We hadn't seen declines at that rate for really, as you saw from the previous slides, in the last 10 years for sure. But we've already beat that, and so there's a need to kind of go back and realign there. Of course, we're doing that with those cash flow models. But we also want to be prudent. I think the next little box there talking about 2,000 students over 10 years, at the end of that would be a $20 million swing. Well, building that into a cash flow projection just paints some picture that, number one, we don't know if that will be reality, and number two, we know we're gonna get these checkpoints twice a year, our enrollments in October and February to monitor those things. So, really, I think that piece especially is, number one, knowing that that's reality, but number two, we've been working hard with the SCA 1 Commission. We have right now getting ready to implement those cost savings. We need to obviously see that impact on our financial projections. And then as it indicates, just monitor that declining enrollment. We're excited today. We kicked off our kindergarten enrollment and, not that there's necessarily a magic bullet there, but certainly we want to make sure that all the positive things happening in Wayne Township are out there for families and try to get them in the door and get their students registered with us. The other piece then is just those kind of one-time events. We talked about some of those with the Board of Finance, occasionally we do get some increased property tax collections related to late payments and things like that. Grant dollars unspent and available versus overspent. Don't want to give the impression that we are not always spending every last dollar. In fact, typically we overspend just a little bit to make sure that that never happens. As we see ourselves getting toward the end of a grant though, if for instance, a position that was in that grant hasn't been filled for 9 months, there's some dollars that we then have, we need to do an amendment to that grant so we can spend that money. At the end of 25 is one of the pieces that gave us just a small cushion as well. And of course, over the last few years, we've talked about the unprecedented interest rate levels that we've been able to leverage due to our cash balance and obviously the presence of those interest rates. So we're careful to take those into account, but not lock them in as gospel for revenue that probably isn't likely to sustain itself over that 6 to 10 year horizon. So what do we need to be responsive to? Of course, we talked about being careful with these pieces. You know what, I just realized these snappy slides for an AI production and it doubled me up on this. So we've talked about all of this, but I'm happy to talk about it more if you would like me to. But also there are some continued pieces that are recurring financial impact and unfortunately are not positive. We increased the state should say, increased the contribution we're responsible for TRF. There's another, if you add 3% to this, some districts have employees pay that 3% in Wayne. The board picks up that contribution. So I'm capturing kind of what would typically be the board contribution because that's the way that the TRF board presents these numbers. But 6% increase here in 26, about $350,000 impact. That more money out the door. Of course, we're happy that us as educators and all the staff working for us are going to have the option and availability of a pension and an annuity when they retire. But that is money out the door. In 2027, that goes up another whole percent, which is about $750K additional, recurring dollars that we need to contribute to TRF on behalf of our employees. The other piece is House Bill 1210, which is not yet to the finish line, but in its current version would protect the debt fund, meaning that the new credits, the $300 credits that any homeowner, business owner, those are, I think, specific to homeowners are eligible for. Those are right now, the way that law was written, that impact is split between our operations fund and our debt fund. When we were on our last ratings call with S&P, that starts to make them a little bit nervous. that makes their investors a little bit nervous. So IASBO, the Superintendent's Association, everybody's been lobbying the legislature to correct that. What most of those lobbying efforts are focused on is fixing that for 2027. Because as you know, we are long past certifying our budget for 2026. We've done, that's the end of that process is October. And in its current form, that would hit us in 2026 though. And so what it means for us is there's about a $1.1 million unfunded credit that right now sits on the debt side of that property tax collection. And about 800 to 900,000 that sits on the operations fund side. So that means dollars that we will not collect as an unfunded credit. House Bill 1210 is going to shift all of that to operations because it's protecting the debt fund as the first money out the door to protect those investors and that as investments into the future for people who are purchasing those bonds on the open market, et cetera. So that, as that shifts over, that becomes a liability, an additional, less revenue in only the operations fund. For us, we have a cash balance in our debt fund. And if you may remember, if we go back a couple iterations, 2 or 3 legislative cycles, part of the strategy in letting the second referendum expire was to take advantage of something called the protected taxes waiver, which really allowed us to transfer money from our cash balance in debt to operations and give us that one-time infusion. In essence, SEA 1 kind of created that for us. We can no longer take advantage of that due to subsequent changes in state code. But that 1.1 million hitting us in the debt was really okay, at least in the short term. We have that cash balance. We could weather that storm. We're much leaner on the operations fund side. And so that's another piece that we'll see how that one gets to the finish line, when that's going to impact us. And then of course, bake that into our cash flow projections and see what will that look like as we move into the future.
But right now, the legislation, just to be clear, is written so that that takes effect this year. And really, we're lobbying for it to happen in 27, so that we can prepare for that kind of insurance.
So where we go from here, as we talked about a little bit on the previous slides. Number 1, implement the cost savings measures that we've identified. Of course, adjust enrollment projections, but don't be draconian. We're not building in, if you, doesn't take a lot of math to just say whatever that number is in 10 years, if you subtract 20 million, guess what? That's bad. It's not looking good. So that part of the projections, we're trying to just be smart with. We know what we're looking at. We know what the projections say. Now let's see what reality brings us. So within that, I am happy to answer any questions that you have, but.
I have a couple questions. Great information. Thank you. Good report. The 626 students, I'm assuming the 199, that's included in the 626 for the year? Or it's in addition?
In addition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then do we know for those 626, obviously the 199, you said 126 were early graduates. Where did the others go? The 400 and some were from last year. Do we know that information? Maybe.
So most of them, this 470 number is really the negative replacement number. So it was called 1,400 that graduated or left us as seniors. And then approximately, I think we're closer to 1,000 now in our kindergarten cohort, and then factor in just some other departures.
So nothing big, like not elementary school or not 6th going into 7th grade or.
It's really a slow burn.
And it's a slow burn.
Yeah.
It's on the front end, we don't have as many coming in, and we have more leaving. And then all the other factors in terms of birth rates and that are just hitting us all at once. Believe it or not, there are districts surrounding us pretty close by that lost close to 1,000. We're not too far from it.
Yeah, 626 plus 199. I haven't checked in with a lot of my peers on February, but
Yeah,
I think
thanks.
some similar.
And then based on those numbers, you were able to not have to fill some teaching positions in the fall, right, some of the fall.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I will tell you that since 2011, maybe 12, we had a demographer, maybe even a little bit before that said we would never go over 11 to 12,000 students in this district, and they were wildly wrong. So let's hope they're wildly wrong about it, because it is just a prediction, right?
That's right.
That's right.
That's exactly right. And there is a little bit of a rebound we saw that's happened, just not as significant. But you're right, there is this element. The other piece that we can't predict is the movement. Being an open district and, how our community, surrounding communities, families would choose way.
It really creates a challenging narrative because when you look at declining enrollment, you think, oh, you need less money. And so then to tell a story that, well, we're losing funding and we need to cut back, we need replacements. It's a really hard narrative to sell to people. It's like, well, you have less students, you should be spending less money.
Right.
Right. And so it's just,
And
it's just a challenge.
the complexity of that gets even more difficult. There's a narrative out there that, okay, we have declining enrollment. In our case, 600 students, let's equate that to 18 teachers, but it's not linear.
It's not,
It's not clear.
Exactly. right.
Spread across the,
But as you mentioned, your work, Dr. Pierce is constantly, always bringing those projections and what that looks like, warm body count, I believe. So, yeah, but exactly right. It is not linear. It doesn't mean we can reduce a bus driver and eliminate 10 routes. It doesn't mean we can consolidate 15 classrooms or, not need, support with 10 paras. Just those pieces. It's really a lot messier than that. When we think about serving the students who are sitting in our classrooms.
Right.
How do we continue to do that?
we were having a discussion today in cabinet and, the question was asked, well, how many kids are getting on our buses? More than 10,000 of our 15,000 students get on our buses daily. So to say, just eliminate transportation. Right, it's not that simple. As it's, each community is unique and specifically to Wayne, it's, what do we need to do to service our students and our families? So it's all of those pieces that we're constantly monitoring and thinking through and trying to find ways to make sure we're being, conscientious with the budget and we're considering lots of. But those are the questions we get, just eliminate that, right?
They want to sprinkle our car rider line.
Car rider.
They'll change their mind.
it makes me shudder.
In a community where our parents are, some of them working 2 or 3 jobs.
That's right.
To try to support their family, and now they gotta figure out how to. To tell them they gotta figure out how to get their kids to school.
Right, with limited sidewalks.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Right.
But eventually, I mean, if that was to never come about, we would lose people. But Paris would be.
I start my own bus service. I got minivan.
So are the average of the elementary schools, we used to like to keep around 800, where are we?
Our lowest enrollment, Dr. Pierce, is 6.
Around 600.
Yeah.
Our highest is around 800. We're probably more an average of about 725.
Those numbers. Which still is a decent number of students in our elementary school.
Yeah. When can you get rid of accrual counting now that we're below 15?
So that is,
I'm trying to look at the sunshine here. Save a little money there.
that is a looming question for another board meeting. So we do We are now certified under 15,000, so the gap reporting requirement no longer applies to us. It is something that is advantageous though with S&P. And so when we think about our bond rating, we think about the interest that we're paying. There's some calculation there that we haven't dug into yet as far as what type of interest rate change that might generate to then determine what that would mean from a taxpayer perspective. Is it actually financially better to pay for the gap reporting today and save that money over the next 20 years when we think about what that might look like? So a little bit of analysis left to do there, but I suspect that the answer is going to be, from a business office perspective and a volume of work perspective, the easy answer is let's move on from that. Financially, though, I don't think it's quite that simple.
No.
But good job remembering that. Excellent.
And as we grow, we're gonna need.
And then
That's right.
that's right. There's, I think, an argument there, at a minimum, we need to wait and see, because
Yeah.
as you said, it's projections.
That's right.
You know, what reality brings. We certainly hope keeps us over 15,000. That would be great. Great.
Thank you, Dr. Singh.
Thank you.
Dr. Suggs, do you have any board information this evening?
I have a few things. As mentioned earlier, kindergarten enrollment began today. And when we opened the doors, there were smiley faces waiting to come in. We have picture opportunities for our class of 2039. It's sweet. It's so sweet. So we're excited about that. We want to thank Dr. Harvey and his team for really putting in the time and effort to create a space that's welcoming to our families. To Ms. Templeman's office for helping us get the word out. If you haven't seen it, if there's just the cutest video with our kindergarten babies, inviting our families to come in and see what we have to offer as a school district. So that'll go on all week. Friday, we'll end a little early. It'll be from 7 to 11 so that we can kind of see where our numbers take us. Now, this is a special push for our younger families, but any family that would come in would certainly get assistance. And enrollment will continue at the centralized enrollment office after this week. So spread the word. Late start Mondays continue. Our teachers and staff are working really hard, and Dr. Pierce shared some really great information about the things that teachers are grappling with and learning. I often get lots of pictures that I share with you from those experiences. So we're just really excited about how our staff are taking advantage of that time. And really that is a value add to our community in terms of how we're able to better serve our students. And so I wanted to make sure I recognize those efforts tonight. Our superintendent's art competition, amazing. I was absolutely being honest when I said my art never looked anything like what the kids presented tonight. And so it really is a nod to the work that our art teachers do with our students and how they really teach the technique and all of the different mediums that our kids are able to explore at such young ages. It's just incredible. So I'm so proud that we continue that work and recognize our students for their art. Our jazz band today, I got multiple pictures from colleagues who were down at the State House and said, your band is outstanding. And so I just wanted the board to know that our kids, again, are representing us well. And as we heard tonight, just create such beautiful music. And I was really proud to get those texts today. The legislative session will end this week. There are some key legislative items that we will talk about in particular. I provided a presentation. I hope that was helpful to you last week. ISBA did a phenomenal job in trying to organize it in a way that it was digestible. We kind of understand what's coming forward here in the near future. But we will have a presentation from attorney Justin Swanson on March 9th. where he can answer all of your questions, give some in-depth overview of the legislative session. So we'll look forward to that. And then finally, we have so many activities going on right now. I won't name them one by one, but lots of athletic competitions. Several of our elementaries will be having their musicals at the high school. I believe this week it's Garden City and McClellan's gonna do two. This week, yeah, so that's exciting, so that's all I have for tonight.
So much. Or anything else?
I was down, for the ISBA Steakhouse today and, listened to some of our lawmakers talk about some of the laws that are up there, so nothing surprising to talk about. There seems to be a lot of disagreement about this new cell phone ban and what constitutes as putting your cell phone away. Does a book bag count? Does it not count? Does it no longer has to be secure?
Right.
So it was just interesting to hear them talk back and forth about what all this means and what all is happening. But it was good to be down there, and I do look forward every Friday to get a phone call from Dr. Suggs now. I
Great.
appreciate those phone calls and those things.
One tweak to the phone calls, it usually occurs while my kid is in an athletic practice. I always think something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
It took a minute to get used to it. What's going on? Yeah.
I remember I don't have a kid in the district, I was like, he's 9 about that going on, the kids.
We did make one tweet, you should have gotten the transcript of what was said in case someone doesn't catch.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It is very cool.
Everything.
Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn at 7:22 PM.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned at 7:22. Thank you all.
Thank you.